Go to Pennhurst and find your next podcast with someone from the UK. Stay tuned.
It's time for Survivor Angels, an approach to strengthen trauma survivors. Here, you can escape what draws negativity and engage your positive abilities and the gifts that you've always had. Let's activate your angels. And to help you on that journey, here's Chaplain Jodi.
I can't believe that I actually met you in the U.S. And you are, of course, part of Help My House is Haunted, as well as being an author. And so, Penny Griffith-Morgan, welcome to Survivor Angels.
Thank you.
How did you get started in the paranormal? Let's start there.
Well, without plugging my books too much, Jodi.
Oh, feel free.
This one tells people how it all happened. So, and the reason, if my name is Penny, it's not Peggy, is that I write for a magazine called Haunted Magazine, which is one of the biggest, probably the biggest haunted magazine in the UK. It's sold over here. Dan Class, who runs Hinsdale House, he is the wholesaler for the US, and I'm one of their feature writers, and they nicknamed me Peggy because of my initials, PG. So that's why the book's called Becoming Peggy, because it's all about things that have happened to me and my world. So without going into the whole book and spoiling it for anyone who might read it, I've always believed from a very small age that I'm not a psychic or a medium, but I can feel stuff, I sense stuff, I used to hear stuff. And so I always thought there was something else out there. I was bullied really badly as a kid, and so almost being able to thinking that there was something out there was a kind of a relief to being lonely. When I was, I think it was I must have been about 8 or 9 roughly, me and my late sister were out walking our dog, and we were staring into one of the scary buildings in our village that was derelict, and we saw this really, I compare it to Tinkerbell from Peter Pan, this light. And we don't have glowing insects in the UK, and this light was flying around, but it wasn't on the air, if that makes sense. It was independent, and it flew up to us in the hole we were looking at, and we were both like, oh, and then just vanished, just like that. But we couldn't move for a few minutes. We were frozen, and we didn't realise it at the time. The only reason I realised we'd kind of been frozen was our dog was fast asleep at our feet.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Now, I'm not a massive believer in orbs unless you see them with your naked eye. I mean, light anomalies, I think I've seen them with my naked eye. The ones that people get on their phones and stuff, maybe 1 or 2% have got something in them, but most of them can be explained away. But when you see it with your naked eye, and we saw this and we both agreed never to talk about it, because I'd say it freaked us out, but it confused us. We're only little kids. It confused us so much. And that's kind of where it started. But even the house I grew up in, it's not an old house. It was built in the 1960s. But I used to see stuff in the house. You'd hear sort of footsteps along the landing. And I could never work it out because, it's only old houses that are haunted, right?
Right.
When I got into doing all this, I started, and there's a bit about it in that book, I started researching what had been on the house site before, and it transpires there was a Methodist church there for about 10 years that's not documented anywhere. It is, but it's not really documented. But as I've got older, and my parents were both a bit like, oh, it doesn't exist, there's nothing in it. My dad has sort of changed his mind, and I was there last year, I think, and I've got 2 sons. They're 15 and 11, and we were waiting. My husband and I were waiting for them to come down because we were going out for the day. And I saw if you look up the stairs, one of my parents' bathrooms is right at the top of the stairs, and the door was shut. I figured one of my eldest son, because my youngest was already down, I figured he was in the bathroom because I saw the handle go down and the door shut. I saw it. So I called out to my eldest son, and he goes, "What?" And he was stood right behind me. There was no one in there. And my dad's going, "Oh, they're back." Oh, and you mean, he said, yeah, it's not the first time I've seen that happen. So kind of, but it's not like a bad haunting or anything. It's just there is something there. Now, it could be my late sister for all I know now.
Oh.
But I don't know. And even my husband, when he stays there, he said he's been awake and he has heard footsteps up and down the landing. Gone out to check it's not one of our kids out of bed and there's no one there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of, so I'd always had an interest in it. The history side, that came a little bit later, but that was probably from about the age of 12. My history teacher at school was a guy by the name of Phil Hancock. And he was mad as a box of frogs. Brilliant. Brilliant. I know that saying doesn't, most Americans haven't heard that saying. It's dumb as a box of rocks or something, isn't it? No, mad as a box of frogs. But he was amazing. And he, a bit like when I talk history, he used to get really passionate about it. And I loved it because some teachers, they'd tell you what you needed to learn. And if you questioned it or questioned the analysis, they'd be like, I'm the teacher, you're the pupil, just listen. He didn't. If I questioned stuff after a lesson, he would happily sit down and debate things with me, which I'd never experienced with a teacher before. And so I really started to enjoy it, but not the stuff that you're expected to learn, but the stories that people don't tell you, the stuff you have to dig into newspaper reports for, the stuff you had to dig into census records for, and everything else. So that's how that started. And so I was doing I was really interested in the paranormal for years, but then I got to about 30 and I decided that I had to be sensible. I had to get a mortgage. I had to have a good job. And so I sort of put it to one side. Actually, no, probably about 25, 26. I put it to one side. And it kind of, I think I was probably, when I met my husband when I was 30, a few years after that, I was thinking, why do I give two hoots what other people think of me? If I want to be a bit different, if I find this interesting, I don't really care. And so I started sort of reading about it again, but I didn't know you could do investigations. I didn't know these things happened.
Sure.
And I would have been 40. I was doing my night feed for my youngest and sort of looking for something to watch on the television because he used to take a long time to feed. And I found this show and they were doing ghost hunting and they had these really, I couldn't understand their accents. It was the Tennessee Wraith Chasers and Ghost Asylum.
Oh, sure. Okay.
I can understand their accents now, but I thought this show's so cool. They have gadgets and everything. And I remember the next day when my husband came home from work, I was like, I found this show when I was doing the feed. And he was like, well, why don't you have a go? Why don't you see if there's any groups out there that you can join? And here we are.
Here we are. Absolutely.
Here we are. Well, you asked where it came from.
I knew I would get it since we've already been talking for a good day and a half here.
I'm quite used to talking, yeah.
So the books.
Yeah.
Some of them have the very historical bent to them, very much. Is that where you feel the most comfortable, is when you really have to dig and do the research?
Oh, I love it. Yeah. I love it. It's my drug. It's...
Why? What is it about that?
The learning. It's the thing I love about both the paranormal and the history is you're telling someone's story that probably hasn't been told for over 100 years, and you're making them alive again,
or maybe ever.
So, I mean, it's something I do that people think I'm a bit weird when I do this, but when I go into a graveyard or a cemetery, I'll say the person's name as I walk past their grave, because that name probably hasn't been said for decades. And they were a person. And it's a similar thing with this. Now, part of doing the history in the way I write it in my books, I try to write it in a very accessible way for people, but also in a way that they'll read it and go, I'm going to look more into that. I don't give them everything because I like the fact that then someone discovers the joy of learning. Yeah. And that's why I do it. Also, the amazing thing about the history side is there are many, I think nearly all of my books, there's times when I've been able to find the history that's backed up the paranormal experience. Yeah, so I have found like historical evidence that has backed up. For example, it's in the one book I haven't got with me today because I have got 6 books, but what was I going to say? Yeah, so I have my first book was called My Haunted History, and there's a chapter in there on a place called Highlands House, which is in Chelmsford. And during the war, World War II, it was the SAS headquarters. And a lot of people don't know that there's myths about what they think happened there. But when I was there, there was a whole group of us. And through like a voice box, someone kept saying, a man kept saying, and it was the same voice, penny, corporal, penny, penny, corporal, penny. And he kept saying it. And there was about 20 of us in the room. And I said, do you want me to come back on my own? And the same voice went, yes, and then cut off. Bit odd. A friend of mine and I went back there on our own into this particular room. And we set up an Ovilus. And the Ovilus gave us a full name, first name and second name. The word corporal, again. Then I said, I was asking questions, and it also gave us an area I think it was in North Germany off the top of my head. And I was like, this is a bit weird. Well, anyway, I'd forgotten about it. When I got home, a couple of days later, I thought, let's see if this person existed.
Sure enough.
He did. He was a Marine commando. He died in this particular battle that the SAS took part in. But it was the first name and surname both fitted. So that's where the history can come in, and that sort of thing still brings me out in shivers when that sort of thing. It doesn't happen all the time. It's not one of those things that I conjure up.
Right.
But when it does happen, like for example in Bosworth Hall, one of the people who was there with me, she's a really talented psychic medium, and she'd drawn and described this picture of this military guy, but it didn't fit with the military who would have the military people who were associated with that building at the time she was talking about was Royal Navy. This guy would have been in a kind of like more of a soldier army uniform, and it didn't make sense to me. So I did some digging, and I found the uniform, and I also found who was related to the place that wore that uniform, just by digging. So I find it really interesting to sort of. It doesn't always work like that.
No, it doesn't.
But when it does, it's quite. But I say it's mind blowing. I probably prefer the research to doing the investigating these days because I like my sleep. But I do enjoy investigating, and I do enjoy then sort of seeing what can I find and. But the whole thing with the history in my books, I try to make it accessible to people who are not historians, because once they realise how easy it is to read and how easy it is to sort of gain knowledge,
Yes.
and ask questions as well, my job's done.
Right. Because it's starting to get a little noisy, busy in here. 2 more questions.
Yeah.
First one is, being from the UK,
Yeah.
your history goes back centuries. Here in the US, ours is
Well, you've got the history, but it's not as documented
true.
as how I would differ it. Yeah.
Yes. So we are sitting here at Pennhurst right now. And this is an incredibly active place.
Yes.
And I don't know how much you've experienced of it. You've been in here a few hours.
I've been in it. I was here last year, and we explored downstairs. And the next day, I woke up with 3 scratches appearing on my neck.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I think I know the answer to this, but because I don't get that many people from other countries who dig into the paranormal, do the spirits feel different between countries?
No.
Okay. That's what I thought.
No, the only time I've experienced a difference is if they speak a completely different language. It's a question, actually. My eldest son is learning to be a paranormal investigator, and he asked me this. He said, if we were, say, doing an investigation in France, do we need to speak French? And I think that's a really good question, because sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. But what I do find is that speaking sometimes a foreign language in a place is a brilliant trigger, because they suddenly go, I get what you're trying to say. I almost think they can understand it. It's almost like they're reading what you're trying to say as opposed to hearing the words. But when I was at a place called Point du Hoc, which is where it's one of the beaches, it's the top cliffs of where one of the beaches where the Americans invaded in Normandy during the war. I was walking around, and it was a German gun encampment, And as I'm walking around, I heard someone, clear as a day, yell, "Scheiße, Scheiße," behind me.
Oh.
And I said to my son, "Did you say that?" And he went, "No." Now, there were tourists around, but there was no one around us in the bit that we were at. I didn't know what that meant. I don't speak German. Well, I can say hello and thank you in German. That's about it.
Right.
When I spoke to someone I knew who was a fluent German speaker, she said, there's two things that could mean, but the common one is the swear words.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Now, thinking about what happened to Point du Hoc, the Germans were basically bombarded from the sea by the British Navy to soften them, ready for the American troops coming up.
Right.
So could I have encountered, I don't think it was interactive, I think it was residual, but could I have encountered a spirit who's suddenly getting, you know, all hell rained down on them, swearing?
Exactly.
So I think you can, but whether the interactive, I think that's for residual, you will hear them in their own language. But do I say, no, I don't feel, I mean, I've been to a few places in the US. I've investigated Fort Mifflin, I've investigated the Shanley Hotel in New York State. It doesn't, no, I don't feel a humanitarian difference.
Right. A spirit is a spirit.
Yeah.
Okay. So, last question. Because I deal with angels, of course, all shapes, kinds, however, whatever form they come, aliens, cryptids. When you were first talking about those flashes of light that moved, that's another way that angels appear. Did you feel for an instant that that might have been angels, or have you encountered angels, do you believe?
Not that I know of. I mean, a friend of mine called Kate Ray, she's an expert in Fae lore, and she said it could have been a fairy, which is what could have frozen you. And she said it's interesting you compared it to Tinkerbell in Peter Pan, but it was the fact that it was moving like Tinkerbell moved, and how bright she is. From what I can, obviously it's a long time ago, but from what I can remember, we weren't scared. It didn't feel scary, but it also didn't make us, we just were hypnotized. That's the only way I can think about it. And I don't know. I don't know. It's one of those things I don't think I'll ever know.
Probably not.
What it was.
Yeah.
But it was just odd. And as I got older, and obviously I started doing all of this, and I tried to debunk it, or at least work out what it could have been.
Sure.
And I've looked into, all I know is it definitely happened. Unfortunately, you can't ask my sister because she passed away 30 years ago, but she was with me, and the dog was fast asleep by the end of it, so I don't know how long we were standing there. But I always think, que sera, sera. What will be, will be. And if it's meant to happen to you, it's going to happen to you, and you take it, right? You run with it.
Yep, very much. Annie, thank you so much. I know this was short, and I'm hoping we meet again, and then we can have another conversation when we've got a little bit more time. But all the best.
Thank
and
you.
I'm going to come visit you in the UK.
You do that. You do that. You take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jodi.
All right.
Thanks again for joining Chaplain Jodi on Survivor Angels. For more information, go to chaplainjodi.me. That's chaplainjodi.me. And on Facebook at Survivor Angels-Chaplain Jodi. This is Dave Schrader. Until next time, sending you off to activate your angels.